Norville Shaggy Rogers is everyone's favourite stoner hippie and best friend to Scooby Doo, but what I guarantee you didn't know is that he made 25 grand working as a paperboy for a week at age 12. He was also converted into a werewolf by Count Dracula, kidnaps a group of teenage girls in the middle of the night, and relieves 13 demons from their eternal prison who threaten to destroy the entire world. But how did the cowardly and blatantly high hippie with the permanent munchies become part of a monster investigatory agency and a multimillionaire? Keep watching to find out, as in this classic cartoon history episode, we're covering the complete life and times of the Shagster himself. Disclaimer, there have been several iterations of Scooby Doo, so I've attempted to form the most chronologically coherent timeline that doesn't contradict with the events of the original one. I'm primarily covering the TV series and some of the direct-to-video titles from the original 1690 show right up until the year 2000. Finally, there will, and I repeat, there will be excessive nitpicking of a happy little cartoon, so deal with it. Ain't no space for no snowflake flip-flops around here. This is where the real shit goes down. Shaggy's story begins with him being born in Coolsville. His exact date of birth isn't given, but via my investigatory skills, I made an informed guess. Coolsville is said to be in the state of Ohio, and the legal age to drive there is 16. We also know that the gang are of high school age, and that season 1 of Scooby Doo aired in 1969. So assuming that Scoobyverse season 1 takes place in 1969 too, there's going to be a lot of that noise. This means Shaggy must have been born in September of 1953 at the very latest. And this brings us to the Rodgers household. In all iteration of Scooby-Doo, apart from Mystery Incorporated, which I'm not including here because it's just weird as fuck, Shaggy's parents are simply called Mr. and Mrs. Rodgers, or Mum and Pops. We know that a young Mr. Rodgers was a Coolsville policeman, and this could very well be the thing that influenced Shaggy to hook up with the gang and solve mysteries in the future. Following a lifetime fighting crime, Mr. Rodgers goes on to retire to a quiet life with Mrs. Rodgers, who was constantly worried about her son being out all night. And while we're on the topic of parents, in the second ever episode, A Clue for Scooby-Doo, it's revealed that an infantile Shaggy received a garbage disposal unit for his first ever toy. It was this bizarre and hugely inappropriate gift which gave Shaggy a taste for strange food combinations.
His stomach must be made of scrap iron.
Can I help it if my first toy was a garbage disposal?
And hopefully it also spawned the development of child protective services in the US and beyond. I mean, that's just straight up child abuse, let's be honest. Shaggy's other immediate family include a younger sister Maggie, Uncle Gaggy.
I'll pull it off.
The innuendos just continue. Great Uncle Nat and brother-in-law Wilfred. Shaggy's extended family stretch across the US and beyond, with branches in the Midwest, Deep South, and a clan in Scotland. Sorry, I just know what's coming up next. Notable members include Rich Uncle Shagworthy. Similar to Shaggy in appearance, appetite, and attitude, Shagworthy is said to Shagworthy is said to keep his most prized possessions, his food and jewels, in a secret refrigerator. Another relative includes Phyllis Shaggerford, another uncle who owns the Fearless Detective Agency, and McBaggy Rogers, Shaggy's pilgrim ancestor who settled in Plymouth, Massachusetts. Yeah, my laptop fan is just going to be going insane for the next 2 hours, okay. And the owner of Scooby's ancestor, Yankee Doodle Doo.
That useless sack of fucking Yankee Danky Doodle shite.
Shaggy's other relatives include the southern branch of the Rodgers clan via the very politically correct Betty Lou Shagbilly, and another rich uncle in the late Colonel Beauregard, who left his entire fortune and plantation to Shaggy in his will. There'll be more on that later, and I don't know why I turned into a pirate when I said is.
Welcome to the Caribbean, lad.
His sole appearance in the entire series is as a ghost villain in the Scooby-Doo Meets the Boo Brothers TV special. And it is a special, I'm going to talk about it later. It really is a special. Wait, hold on a minute. So let me get this straight. His uncle owned a plantation in the South, was a Confederate colonel, and appeared as a ghost villain. You guessed it. Shaggy is the beneficiary of a slave plantation, and why Mary Lou Shagbilly didn't receive an inch is a mystery even Scoob and the gang couldn't solve. So back to Shaggy, and skipping a few years of parental negligence, we see a glimpse of a 3-year-old Shaggy courtesy of an old family album at his Uncle Nat's house. Already 6 feet tall, he can be seen riding a tricycle and sporting a red t-shirt with a milk bottle in his hand. And he does go back to wearing that red t-shirt later on in his life. I did look in quite a few places, I scanned a few cartoons, I have a life, I didn't sit there watching every flipping episode ever. But this is the only record I found of his toddler years, so you can take this as you will. Rounding off this section of the video, we next find Shaggy attending Redwood Rabbit Daycare Center. There he became friends with Jimmy Proudwolf, his New Mexico counterpart. The pair was said to be almost identical in characters and interest, so similar in fact that Jimmy would go on to own a dog named Scooby. So we know about Shaggy's upbringing, his parents, his relatives, odd birthday gifts, but the elephant in the room is concerning Scooby. More precisely, when exactly did Shaggy adopt him? The original story is that Shaggy adopted Scooby from the Kittingham Puppy Farm when he was old enough to attend school, making Shaggy age 4 or 5 at the time, and this is supported by the fact that both Shaggy and Scooby are said to attend Velma's 5th birthday together. Shockingly, and I say shockingly for a very good reason, this means that by the events of season 1, Shaggy and the gang have been forcibly dragging a scared and elderly 11-year-old dog into life-threatening scenarios and bribing him with Scooby snacks for the past 4 to 5 years. For reference, the typical lifespan of a Great Dane is about 6 or 7 years. So imagine replacing Scooby with a 100-year-old man who's like addicted to butterscotch candy, and you understand just how messed up what the gang is doing. And as if that wasn't bad enough, Scooby is also primarily used as life bait, a role which he is brutally coerced into, as I mentioned earlier, by the gang exploiting his addiction to the substance known on the street as Scooby snacks. Shaggy himself also succumbed to the same addiction and faces similar exploitation by his so-called friends on a daily basis. Moving on from the exploitation of snackheads, we're told in later iterations of the show that Shaggy owned another dog before Scooby, called Zoinks. What happened to Zoinks is unknown, but perhaps Shaggy's vegetarianism, the disappearance of Zoinks, and receiving a garbage disposal unit are in some way connected.
Oh, Lord.
Whatever the case, it was at school that Shaggy met the famous gang in Fred, Velma, and Daphne. The foursome became close friends and were combined to form Mystery Incorporated, the world-famous private detective agency and hoaxbuster extraordinaire, and
Jesus Christ!
That was a mouthful. But before we get into the monster hunting section of the video, now I can't speak, there's one very important detail to cover. Up until now, Shaggy's not actually known as Shaggy yet. It was only upon turning 10 that a young Norville gained his namesake. That name, Jesus. Mercifully, he didn't have to enjoy 7 years of childhood trauma as he was nicknamed Buzz owing to his shortcut before then. But from the age 10 onward, he would forever be known as Shaggy. From my personal perspective, I think other nicknames definitely included something like Shagster, Shagmaster, Shagmeister 3000, or the Shagginator. The reason for the change of the nickname is completely unspecified though. Probably something to do with the haircut if he was called Buzz before, but still, we're not given an exact reason. Turns 10, he's Shaggy. So information about events from age 10 to his Mystery Incorporating days, which started in 1969, is kind of scant, but later iterations of the show give us a glimpse into what he may have been up to. So highlights which don't break the continuity of the original show include working as a junior detective and a paperboy in pre-adolescence, where he develops a very strong saving habit. And I say this because in only 4 years, he would go on to purchase and paint the Mystery Machine for a newly formed Mystery Incorporated. So the Mystery Machine is based heavily on a mid-60s Chevrolet panel van, such as this G10, or a Dodge A100. Back in their years of release, a new one would set you back at least $2,200, probably about £1,800 for people in the UK. So assuming that Shaggy bought one used, we're still talking about a 16-year-old in 1969 being able to pay over £20,000 in today's currency from only 2 years of work between ages 10 and 12, and his stint as a paperboy was pretty much cut short to like one single episode when he was 10 because he found out that his boss was like using his bike chain to operate a counterfeit machine. I think it was making fake money or something. I mean, wouldn't you just buy a chain? Why would you steal one from a 10-year-old? So, What was Shaggy doing between saving more money than most adults have by age 12 and buying the mystery machine, you might ask? Don't know. However, it would appear that, unlike most young men, Shaggy did squander his youth not. Nay, rather invested the time cultivating his talents for the days to come. By age 16, he was already known as the best gymnast at the high school where he also ran track. He's also an accomplished ventriloquist. Pair this with Shaggy being extremely thin, loaded to the hilt, so light that Velma could pick him up with ease. This unique, I say to you again, unique blend of financial muscle, early exposure to law enforcement, and incredible athleticism makes Shaggy Mystery Incorporated's greatest asset. I've said it right there and then. So, we're in the meat of the video. We're never told the exact date that Mystery Incorporated is founded, whose idea it was, or how the gang went about setting everything in order. Nevertheless, Shaggy's instrumental role in bankrolling and decorating the iconic mystery machine goes without saying. What we do know for certain is that the unrivaled ability of 4 high school friends and their elderly dog to solve unresolved cases would go on to become legendary.
Look, gang, a door.
I wonder where it leads.
We'll never know.
So, with my over-the-top idealism, I had originally intended to cover the events of every episode in detail, but I mean, let's just be real here. It's just me doing myself. Yeah, I'm doing myself. It's just me doing this by myself, so you know.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
So, to summarize, the gang would solve numerous mysteries in their prime years as private investigators, busting monsters, ghosts, and ghouls at locations which have gone on to become classics of both film and general media. Standout villains and locations include the Phantom Shadow, inhabitant of a haunted mansion, the zombie-like Creeper, who terrorized an isolated farm, so stupid, haunted swamps inhabited by headless horsemen, I did just try and do an impression and nearly destroyed my mic, and countless other examples. It's during this golden era of mystery solving that we get to see who Shaggy truly is. He displays a carefree and somewhat nonchalant attitude, despite being in a state of constant terror when solving mysteries. Shaggy also displays a sharp wit and a great sense of humour when out with the gang. A savage one-liner or classic punchline is never out of the question when Mr. Rodgers is on screen.
Do you suppose that's the miner moaning?
Well, like if I had a face like that, I'd moan too.
In fact, some dude may even have uploaded a few compilations of Shaggy's best moments, which you should definitely check out. While you're at it, you should also, you know, hit the like and subscribe button. It's free. Just do it, man. Just do it. So, moving back to Shaggy being a BMF, he also shows astounding courage when any of the gang, particularly Scooby, no biases here, but he does prefer the dog, is at risk from any of the villains they're attempting to apprehend. And considering his naturally cowardly nature, it shows that Shaggy is someone that those nearest and dearest can truly rely on to help them out in a tough spot. Aww. Finally, it goes without saying that another legendary ability I haven't mentioned properly yet is the ability of Shaggy to consume food. Throughout his tenure at Mystery Inc., Shaggy is shown to have an insatiable appetite, and when you consider his athletic past, the fact that he's always running away from villains and that he must spend at least 50% of his waking hours in fight or flight, it's actually amazing that he's alive considering that he is always in fight and flight, because his pancreas should be destroyed by now. I think it's pancreas. Nonetheless, perhaps there are logical reasons that explain his unusual appetite, beyond being a simp for Mary Jane, if you catch my drift. Far from workaholics, the gang were partial to the odd bit of time off. After all, when you've solved 25 mysteries in a year, or just over one every other week, you do need some time to wind down. Shaggy and friends frequently took extended breaks from their crime-fighting duties. The gang would spend 56 out of a possible 108 working months from September 1969 to 1979 de-stressing from a highly challenging and dangerous occupation. To put it into perspective, so taxing a responsibility was solving mysteries that Shaggy and Co. would spend 4.6 out of 9 years recharging mentally, spiritually, and physically. It is perhaps these extended breaks which account for Shaggy's rather eclectic and disjointed career path. He became a movie extra at the age of 19 in the 1972 Mammoth Studios production of The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll's Cousin. Original name, original concept. This was courtesy of the gang apprehending studio owner Mr. Hyde White, who was transporting a real monster he created into the studio in a bid to scare people away. Once scared off, he would then buy the surrounding land to expand his business. Now, if you are like me and you do like to nitpick holes in the plot of simple kids' cartoons, then you've definitely come to the right place. For starters, if you wanted to buy the surrounding land, then why would you assume that people would sell their homes if the studio was the only place being haunted? Rather, it makes more sense to, haunt the actual land that you want to buy. Seriously, imagine if you were one of the residents. Oh no, the house exactly opposite mine is haunted, but every other property, including mine, and the ones directly next door to it are fine. Well, I guess we'll just stay here actually. I mean, that monster seems pretty considerate, all things considered. I mean, Dr. Jekyll over there, his life is pretty much ruined, but, no need for me to sell my house really and uproot my entire family and life.
Not a great plan.
And then second, if the aim is to expand your business, then disrupting and delaying a multi-million-dollar movie production with a full cast and crew on the books that he assumably approved of filming doesn't seem logical either. And not to mention, when news of, an actual live haunting just in your movie studio spreads around, I mean, your stock price is Finally, if he owned the studio, couldn't he have just dressed up in a costume, spooked the place once and told everyone it was haunted and then just stopped the production himself? I mean, he could still execute the rest of his nonsensical and doomed to fail plan like this, whilst avoiding the risk of being arrested for creating, an actual live monster. Not to mention countless lawsuits, the potential of a newborn monster going rogue, compounding the fact again that, there's a slim to none chance that anyone would sell their homes and lands just because a random studio was being haunted anyway. Side note, it says in the episode synopsis that Mr. White was arrested and presumably went to jail. I mean, the guy created an actual live sentient creature inside a lab. This is the greatest scientific achievement ever known to humanity. Like, every world government would literally kill to get exclusive access to this technology, and all my man got was a few nights in a local timeout spot. Anyway, I digress. It's not known if Shaggy was compensated for his role, so this non-occurring acting occupation was likely a voluntary and one-off agreement. The next rung of the Shagmaster's career nearly saw him become part owner of Dick Van Dyke's Barrel of Fun Carnival in 1973, at the tender age of only 20. The titular owner was so happy that his business had been saved by Mystery Incorporated busting the carnival strongman haunting the carnival dressed as a ghost, that he offered each of the gang shares of the business. Humble as ever, Shaggy, alongside the gang, rejected this offer, preferring a lifetime of free tickets for the carnival instead. And I hope for their sake that the carnival rides were worth it, because things have changed for the worse the next time we hear of Shaggy in September of 1976, at the age of 25. Shaggy, alongside Fred and Scooby, who is 18 by this point I might add, have fallen flat on their face and are working as construction workers in the fall of 1976. I should note that in no way am I saying that construction is a poor career field. Construction is heavily unionized in the US and beyond, with strict training, qualification and experience required to work on major high-rise projects like the one we see Shaggy working on. Therefore, we can conclude that Shaggy spent the 3-year interlude from solving mysteries between 1973 to 1976, attaining professional accreditation and basic on-the-job training. Even if he is shown to be rather inept at the time, construction, though, wouldn't prove to be Shaggy's true calling, unfortunately. Whether it be due to a lack of passion or a paralysing fear of heights, which doesn't seem like the best two things to combine, to be honest with you, the threesome would promptly leave the construction business shortly after busting the faux 180-year-old spectre of Ebenezer. 1976 would also prove to be a pivotal year for the lineup of Mystery Incorporated. The following decades would see the gang team up with several other crime and mystery solving aficionados. It would also see new permanent members introduced onto the team, with some of the original members assuming a backseat role from here on out. Kicking off with the previously mentioned construction solving mystery, this period from September 1976 to December 1976 saw Shaggy and company team up intermittently with crime-fighting duo Blue Falcon and his robotic assistant, Dynomutt.
Longer than a train with a so-so brain.
The teams would join forces with the Mysteries of Mystery Inc. typically following the usual trope of inadvertently stumbling across situations in which a mystery would magically present itself. However, unlike their previous happenings as a solo crew, this period saw the gang pushed to its limits. Instead of the usual common folk masquerading as some sort of ghost, ghoul, or monster, the criminals pursued by Dynomutt were often hardened criminals, supervillains, or even real supernatural beings. As such, Shaggy and co were instrumental in the capture of fearsome foes, including Dr. Hyde White, again, who was attempting to convert an entire city into Mr. Hyde's unless he was elected mayor. That's probably even stupider than the last thing. And the Swamp Rat and Mudmouth, who were foiled in their scheme to flood Big City to start a crime spree. Again, as far as these plots go, your plan is to create a crime spree by flooding the city? Okay.
This is the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
September of 1976 would also see the introduction of Scooby Doo, another amazing PC character name right there. Oh man. During a visit to the owners, Martin passed Skillet in their Georgia Swamp home. As the name suggests, Mr. Dunn is a dim-witted cousin of Mr. Doo, and he would accompany the gang sporadically from here on out. I think his catchphrase was even Scooby Dooby Dum, so that, I mean, yeah, I don't know what to say really. Moving on. The following month is also when we're finally introduced to the rich Uncle Shagworthy, and it turns out that Shagworthy inherited the old king. You know the name just caught me again. Can you imagine? Hi, I'm Shagworthy. Fucking hell, man. So it turns out that Shagworthy inherited the old King Arthur castle and had it transported to New England stone by stone, where it was rebuilt for his convenience. Think about that. Wealth, alright. And unfortunately for the continent-shifting castle, conveniently, Shagworthy also brought the ghosts of Merlin and the Black Knight along too.
Pull the Falcon's bottomless boat, and its feather will float like a secret lever in a moat.
No. You say it.
Long story short, the usual happenings of catching villains in disguise occur with the real intention of stealing the wealthy Shagworthy's jewels. As previously mentioned, hinting at a familial reverence of food, Shagworthy reveals to the gang that his jewels were actually stored in the walk-in fridge the whole time, and Shaggy and Scooby are rewarded with a banquet. Shagworthy's family is never mentioned, nor is there any notion of having kids. Thus, it's highly likely that Shaggy stands to add a historically significant medieval castle to an already impressive list of familial assets. 1977 to 78 would see much of the same, with Shaggy and co travelling increasingly across the globe and solving the many mysteries they happened across. Of these, notable encounters include Shaggy posing as a race car driver in October 1977, which I'm going to cheekily count as an occupation. The same month also saw Scooby reunited with his cousin Scooby Doo, and the introduction of his female cousin Scooby Doo, who was making a movie at the time. Wait, not that kind of movie, just normal movie, man. And this brings us into the Scooby Doo era of 1979 to 1983. Following a 9 months hiatus from working on cases, Shaggy would reunite with his friends, but for the first time in history, the gang would have a new, permanent member that would forever shake the foundations of the Mystery Inc. lineup. September 1979 would see the introduction of Scrappy Doo, and his bravery in solving mysteries would quickly take prominence over other members of the group. By 1980, the ranks of Mystery Inc. had been thinned to just Shaggy, Scooby, and Scrappy. The three companions would travel around the world, often interacting with real monsters. It seems that they quickly developed a taste for more serious monster work, as in 1982, Shaggy and co would be hired by fearless Uncle Shaggerford to work as detectives at his Fearless Detective Agency, a role the threesome would competently fill for 12 months before changing career yet again the following year. It is unknown if Shaggy and the other members of the gang had a falling out, or simply wanted a break from solving mysteries. But given Shaggy's role as owner of the Mystery Machine, it only makes sense that he would be the one to carry the mantle in the other's absence. We'd also see Yabba, Scooby and Scrappy-Doo embark on mysteries together without any human companions throughout this period. And I mean, how two dogs and a puppy travelled across the country and why they were allowed out on their own, it's not quite clear. But Shaggy must have had his reasons, and with the amount of wealth the man's amassed, who are we to argue with him? This brings us to 1983, when Daphne would return to the fray. The now quartet works as freelance investigative journalists via the Scooby Doo Detective Agency. So the ownership of the Scooby Doo Detective Agency isn't disclosed, but since Scooby Doo is, a dog, it's likely that Shaggy and Daphne launched the joint venture. As with many of the investigations Shaggy would be involved in following his initial Mystery Inc. run, most of the investigations concern supernatural beings and creatures, instead of the cliched man behind a mask trying to scare people away to achieve said nefarious plans. And it's almost as if the show creators realised that the man behind the mask thing is a bit repetitive. So what we're going to do is freshen up the format by repeating a new formula over and over and over again. Like, wait, what? So Shaggy, alongside Daphne, Scooby and Scrappy, would continue their investigative journalism throughout 1983, until they were joined by two real motherfucking OGs. And that's right, it's 1984, and gang business is back, with the return of Fred and Velma to the mystery solving scene. This was the first time in 4 years that the founding members of Mystery Incorporated were out working cases together, with notable investigations including Amazonian ancient aliens.
I didn't know they played football, Ed.
They're astronauts' helmets, Shaggy.
Yeah, well, they're really scraping the bottom of the barrel with this. And even helping Count Dracula and a host of real monsters take down an evil magician and a ghost. And yes, that plot makes absolutely zero sense. But after 24 years, it's to be expected. I mean, what Fred, Daphne, Velma, Shaggy, and two dogs can possibly contribute to catching a ghost and a magician, to Dracula and a bunch of real monsters, I don't know. So moving from a nonsensical plot, we move on to a contrived and unique storyline, let's say. So 1985 takes a shocking turn to start with, as we see Shaggy switch up his wardrobe, sporting a red t-shirt instead of a green one. And what in the heck happened to Daphne? What the f***, man? Okay, so we open things off with Shaggy piloting the flying mystery machine on a trip to Hawaii with Scooby as co-pilot and chief navigator. And, what could possibly go wrong by having a dog as your co-pilot? So, in usual fashion, the real motherfucking gang business OGs are indeed thrown off course, only to run out of fuel and crash land in the Himalayan mountains, where a ghost-infested haunted castle awaits them. And this is what happens when a dog is reading the map. So through several contrivances, and these are serious contrivances, Shaggy and Scooby are lured by two ghosts with an ulterior motive. They give Shaggy and Scooby, via a faux game show, a choice of prizes, ranging from their missing crashed airplane, which, they've been trying to find for at least the last 18 hours by now, a luxury car, the doggy dream house, and a suspiciously and obviously evil looking box.
Uncle Scooby, don't open that. Never mind.
Of course, Shaggy and Scooby choose the box, which turns out to be the Chest of Demons, an infamous magical artifact containing the 13 most terrible and powerful ghosts ever to walk the earth. And plot twist, Shaggy and Scooby are also the only ones able to recapture the ghost, because they are the ones that freed them in the first place. But fear not, for their new mystic companion, who looks suspiciously similar to Doctor Strange, is along for the ride, alongside a resourceful local named Flimflam. And believe me, Flimflam doesn't get annoying in any way, shape or form. There's nothing irritating about this
Scrappy, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship. I've taken the liberty of filling the gas tank. Neither. I filled it with a few cases of lots of luck joy juice.
Also, look at the dimensions. Like, Scrappy is standing next to him, and Flim Flam's about the same height. Like, what, is this a 2-year-old or something? Despite the world being in mortal danger, Fred and Velma don't accompany Shaggy and Co across any of these adventures, as they're said to both be away at summer camp. I say they're said to be away at summer camp, as the period in question stretches from September to December. I mean, how difficult would it have been to create literally any other excuse which didn't conflict with the seasons of the year? Honestly, come on. So contrary to common sense, this period of Shaggy's life ended with only 12 of the 13 ghosts being captured, though considering that neither Shaggy nor the entire world took any notice of the fact that, you know, an evil demon was sideways up a motherfucking wall, I'll just say planet Earth had collective amnesia until a direct-to-video sequel captured the 13th ghost some 34 years later, and moved swiftly on to the year 1987 with nothing else said. So from convoluted to convoluted. And of all the convoluted circumstances, the passing of Shaggy's aforementioned Uncle Colonel Beauregard really has to be up there. So in short, the journey south begins with Shaggy being chased from his home in the dead of the night by a ghost witch. Once Shaggy gets south, Shaggy, Scooby and Scrappy discover that Colonel Beauregard's estate is also haunted, and that there's a hidden treasure somewhere deep inside the estate that the creepy house servant believes is rightfully his. Obviously, and for once actually, Shaggy wants to leave, but his car sinks in quicksand. And I just want you to think about this for a second. He gets out the car, goes into the house, finds out there's a creepy butler, finds out that there is, what do you call it? That there's a treasure, and, you know, let's be generous and say this only took 20 minutes. So he got out the car, stepped in quicksand, nothing happened. Walked away, nothing happened. The second he wants to leave and go back home, all of a sudden the quicksand works. So obviously we're now stuck in the, oh no, they're trapped on a haunted farm with a creepy butler. Oh look, there's a treasure hunt, and there's also an escaped circus ape. I mean, who could possibly have seen that coming? Well, the ape is pretty random, but you get my point. So upon realizing what's going on with the ghosts and that they're trapped at the estate, Scrappy decides to call in some inept ghost hunters, the titular Boo Brothers, who themselves are also ghosts, to take care of the situation. Also, Shaggy meets Sadie Mae Scroggins. These names are just brilliant. Who promptly falls for Shaggy and her older brother Bill, who wants to shoot him dead. You know, one of them's in love, one of them wants to blow your head off, a normal Sunday or whatever. Apparently the Scroggins and Beauregards didn't get along that well. And also that circus gorilla just keeps on like appearing just randomly, doing really strange and bizarre things throughout the episode, so there's that too. And it turns out all of the ghosts of the mansion were the sheriff's evil twin brother, because of course they were, and because of course he had an evil twin brother. And the gorilla really was just a random escaped circus gorilla, who could have chose to go anywhere in the world, but obviously he just chose to loiter around this random estate for no reason. Shaggy donates the treasure that they find in the end to the Beauregards orphan charity, and he gives the estate to the Boo Brothers to happily haunt in perpetuity. And wait, hold on a minute. How the f*** was Shaggy only now being called to inherit the mansion estate, when the ghost of Colonel Beauregard is clearly shown to be a middle-aged Confederate soldier? The guy must have died like at least 100 years earlier than this. Like I said, convoluted. Now, from convoluted to downright absurd. The next significant event occurs in October of 1988, with Shaggy, Scrappy and Scooby working as gymnast teachers. So I say absurd for two reasons. The first is that a dog and a puppy are hired in any professional capacity, let alone teaching and having responsibility over minors. The second is that the girls' school they're employed by is inhabited by a litany of paranormal creatures, ranging from the spawn of Dracula and Frankenstein to a pair of legs and a floating hand. I mean, of course it is. Not to mention how a pair of legs couldn't possibly have a gender. I mean, if it's a pair of legs with a box in the middle, fine. And the hand, I don't know how you give that a gender, but they're both female apparently. In typical fashion, the petrified Shaggy decides to remain at the school rather than leave. Because, you know, if you went for a typical job and saw, you know, a pair of legs walking around, just legs on their own and a floating hand, I'm sure you'd stick around if you were terrified of everything as well. And among other events, Shaggy is hypnotized into essentially kidnapping a group of young girls and discreetly taking them into an isolated bog. Yeah, that's not grapey at all, is it? A mere month later, and Shaggy is now competing as a professional race car driver with a hot new girlfriend in tow. This might sound like a fortuitous turn of events, but it just so happens that Count Dracula is short one race-winning driver and a werewolf for his annual monster race. Never fear though, as a once-in-a-5-century full moon just so happens to coincide with the run into the race. This means that Dracula can Dracula? Yeah, well, it may as well be Dracula by this point. This means that Dracula can now create a new werewolf. And what do you know? Shaggy is a recent race winner. What a strange coincidence, huh? It's also strange and highly convenient that none of the European races fit the bill. I mean, Dracula lives in Transylvania, so Alan Prost was available, Formula 1 world champion, not to mention Ayrton Senna. I mean, if you really want to insist on travelling an entire continent just to kidnap Shaggy, but I mean, what do I know? You need to win a race, you could get world-class racing drivers right round the corner, or a random American kid. I'll take the American, I guess. Lo and behold, Shaggy is transformed into a werewolf, and despite countless other candidates being more skilled and conveniently located, he manages to strike a deal with Dracula for the release of his captured friends and girlfriend. Obviously Dracula doesn't want to give him the deal and he just tries to screw him over, and via the usual shenanigans they all live happily ever after. Side note, Scrappy isn't seen or heard from ever again apart from in his terrible live action appearance, and we're never given an explanation why, so I guess he can just f*** himself. And finally, I've been rolling through, improving the momentum, and we finally get to the last chapter of this adventure. If you guys have enjoyed it so far, please hit the like, please hit the subscribe, and let's crack on with it, man. So, we round out Shaggy's story with the next major event occurring a decade later, in the year 1988. So, following a successful run, busting phony monsters, the gang have taken a 1-year hiatus from solving mysteries, even though the last time they were together as a group was 14 years ago in 1984. So, we check in. Oh god. Sorry, that pun was not intended, but I have to play on it now. We check in at Shaggy's new occupation as an airport customs worker, where Shaggy and Scooby are fired for eating all the confiscated food from passengers' luggage. It's like the dream job for them, right? So with each Mystery Incorporated member now bored by life on the other side, Fred organises a birthday surprise for Daphne, whereby the entire crew get together for a reality TV trip to find real monsters. And come to think of it, Daphne actually said that she forgot her own birthday due to working so hard. So how she is able to go for a cross-country road tour is a bit of a, mystery. See what I did there? Anyhow, they wind their way through the United States and finally find their way to New Orleans, where the gang has seduced them to visiting Moonscar Island, a place genuinely haunted by pirate ghost Morgan Moonscar. So Shaggy and Scooby manage to piss off a local fisherman, voiced by Mark Hamill no less, en route to the island, and upon arrival they immediately annoy their groundskeeper Bo too. To Shaggy's delight, the island is a pepper plantation, so you can imagine what happens during their stay. But something about this place just seems different to all the gang's previous mysteries. Despite remaining skeptical, they're unable to disprove Shaggy and Scooby's ghost sighting from that day. And later on in the night, the entire gang is chased by a horde of zombies. It's only when Fred pulls off the head of one of the zombies that they actually realise that the supernatural beings and sightings are in fact real. The rest of the adventure includes Shaggy unwittingly performing voodoo on Fred, Daphne and Velma, and the origin of the supernatural goings-on is pretty dark. You see, it turns out that Lena and Simone, the two that lured them onto the island in the first place, are survivors of the original cat god worshipping settlers that came to the place in the 1700s. The community was attacked by Captain Moonscar and his pirate crew, and it turns out that the villagers were chased into a bayou where all but Lena and Simone were eaten alive by alligators. They ran off and they prayed to their gods to curse Moonscar and the pirates, and they themselves were transformed into werecats. So they're now immortal and they go and slay the pirates and they get their revenge, but they didn't realise at the time they became cursed themselves. So every single harvest moon, Lena and Simone would transform back into werecats and had to lure people to the island in order to drain their life or they'd die themselves. That sentence was a f***ing mouthful. So about the zombies, it turns out that they're actually the previous victims that were sucked dry by the werewolves. That's what she said. Well, it's not, but whatever. And they reawaken with the harvest moon too. And what they're actually trying to do is scare people away from the island to prevent the same fate from befalling them. And for reference, that's how you do subversion the right way. Rian Johnson, Kathleen Kennedy, and the last Jedi. In the usual fashion, Shaggy and Scooby manage to cause chaos, and the werecats are nearly said something a lot ruder there, man. And the werecats are unable to complete their ritual in time. So that releases Captain Moonscar from his curse, they die, and the zombies now can rest in peace. Also, right at the end, after doing basically nothing of value, Bo, the gardener, reveals himself to be a police officer who was sent to the island to investigate the disappearances. And I'm not even going to start on how incompetent the local police are to recognize that for the past 200 consecutive harvest moons, groups of people have visited Moonscar Island only to never be seen again. And the police have thus far done nothing to stop people from visiting the island. They haven't locked the whole place down or taken any meaningful action in any way. It's okay, Tarai? It's only a cartoon then. And with that, the final piece of incessant nitpicking, Shaggy's story, at least for today, is complete, man. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed it, and if I got at least a minor chuckle out of you, or helped the past hour go by, then I've completed my aims. Let me know in the comments below what the most surprising element of Shaggy's past is. Is it the slave plantation thing? I bet it's the slave plantation thing. This also took me quite a lot of effort, man, so if you guys can hit the like and subscribe button in exchange for some free entertainment, I'd really appreciate it. The next video is all scripted and ready to go, and it's going to be why Endgame failed the MCU. I'm aiming for it to be no more than 20 minutes, so hopefully I stick to that. And after that, I'm going to be uploading the top 5 or 10 comic book thoughts. I'm currently up to 4 thoughts, so I need to find a 5th, and then we'll see how many other thoughts I can get later on for the final number. So keep a lookout for that, and otherwise, peace.